Come on, focus. You can do it. There we go. Well, good afternoon, man. It's been a long time since we've been together. Um, uh, we are on Psalm 55, and we haven't been together because of Christmas break for some time. So I'm thinking what might be valuable would be to recap with Luther's take on Psalm 55, which is this. The 55th Psalm is a psalm of prayer, although it might have been spoken in the person of Christ against his betrayer Judas. I rather let it remain a general prayer against those vile alley cats who lick in front and scratch in back. In appearance, they are such true friends, fathers, brothers, and sisters, so full of love and life compared to us that their mouth is smoother than butter and oil, but behind the scene is nothing but murder, sword, warfare, and the destruction of all, as the psalm says here. That is, they can go with us to the table, to church, and house, on the street, and be the best of companions. Therefore, the devil or death and hell may carry them away, for they create a great heartache and affliction for the people. This curse, however, is a prophecy. Thus, it will certainly be with them, for they can say nothing better, or rather, they do not change and do not fear God. Okay, so that's Luther's take on it. Our psalm breaks down into some chunks here, and I wanted to just talk about that really quickly here. So, Psalm 55, verse 1 through 3, appeal for God to hear. Verses 4 through 8, terror. Verses 9 through 11, which we're going to start with today, verse 9, violence in the city. Verses 12 through 15, betrayal by a friend. Verses 16 through 19, call on the Redeemer. That's that middle section we're going to deal with today. This is a psalm of David. And if we were to date this, I think we talked about it before, most likely this was during the revolt led by David's son Absalom. Okay. Let's actually read you these verses real quick. So we have 2 Samuel. Okay, 2 Samuel, and we are on, verse 2 Samuel chapter 16. Then it's verses 20 through 23. So this is during the time of Absalom and his revolt. Absalom was David's son, right? Remember, he was the one with long hair, and he was very handsome and beautiful, and he was revolting against his father's rule. So David's older. My guess would be what, like in his 50s or 60s at this point. Absalom said to, this is our verses for specific here, that this psalm might be in response to Ahithophel, Ahithophel, verses chapter 2 Samuel chapter 16, verses 20 through 23. Okay, Absalom, David's son, said to Ahithophel, "Give us your advice. What should we do?" So Absalom's asking this guy. Ahithophel answered, "Sleep with your father's concubines, whom he left to take care of the palace. Then all Israel will hear that you have made yourself obnoxious to your father, and the hands of everyone with you will be more resolute." Okay, I'm going to change the translation here because I just think that word for obnoxious is confusing. I want to see what the ESV translates it as. Okay. Okay. So we start off in 15. Absalom goes to a group of people, his friend Hushai, long live the king, long live the king. And Absalom says to Hushai, is this your loyalty to your friend? Why did you not go with your friend? And Hushai said to Absalom, no, for whom the Lord and this people and all Israel and all the men of Israel have chosen, his I will be, and with him I will remain. And again, whom should I serve? Should it not be his son, as I have served your father, so I will serve you. Okay. Then our section for today, Ahithophel said to Absalom, go into your father's concubines who is left to keep the house of Israel, and all Israel will hear that you have made yourself a stench to your father. So, an enemy, to your father, and the hands of all who are with you will be strengthened. So Absalom is, maybe Absalom is not sure exactly what to do. Should I betray my father? And absolutely, at this point, we're not necessarily completely opposed to one another. Should I just kind of cut all ties and go the full? Ahithophel is probably saying that. So they pitched a tent for Absalom on the roof. So in other words, they put this tent up as high, it's as high up as it can go. So everyone in the area can see. There, it'd be like putting it on a billboard, right? Putting it up as high as it'll go. And Absalom went into his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. That is something else. Now, in those days, the counsel that Ahithophel gave was as if one consulted the word of God. So was all the counsel of Ahithophel esteemed both by David and by Absalom. Wow. So David has been betrayed by someone he thought who was, kind of speaking for God, someone whose word was very important and trustworthy. So we get this idea of this general feeling of David feeling very betrayed by Absalom and by Ahithophel, right? Helps us understand the context of the psalm. Okay. So last time we went through verse 1 through 8 of the psalm, right? I would hurry to find a shelter from the raging wind and tempest. So David wants to kind of, my heart is in anguish within me. The terrors of death have fallen upon me. Fear and trembling come upon me, and horror overwhelms me. Is David afraid that the powers that are behind Absalom, rallying behind Absalom, might kill him? Maybe. I think the kingdom is fairly evenly split. So maybe David's not just referring to this, but perhaps he could be referring to the general idea that, I've been betrayed by my own son, by people I trusted. It feels like death, and maybe this idea here is not that David is scared for his life, but if this is happening to me, what's left in life anymore? My heart is in anguish within me. The terrors of death have fallen upon me. Fear and trembling come upon me, and horror overwhelms me. Not because necessarily maybe that he's in fear for his life, but just what has happened. Yeah, it's terrible. Okay, so we get to verse 9 now. 9 is where the worm, it's going to turn a little bit. It's going to pivot. And it's going to pivot towards, now David's going to kind of maybe show his anger to a certain degree. Yeah. Verse 9. And I do have our text. So I'll like I will or have done, I'll read it to you in Hebrew as best I can. My Hebrew reading is not perfect. Bala Adonai is Lord. We realize that one. Bala Adonai, Palag Lesonam. Ki ra'iti Hamas Varib Ba'ir. Ra'iti is a pretty straightforward word because it's the word for, I believe that's the just a version of ra'ah, which is to see. Yeah, ra'ah. So destroy, Lord, Bala. If I remember correctly, I think Bala is a version of Baal, or it comes from the, or maybe actually I could have that wrong. I think Baal comes from the verb Bala. I think that's how that works. Because Baal is the god who destroys, who swallows up, who eats, right? And Baal is, of course, a very common god of other folks in the Old Testament story. But Bala is to swallow down, to swallow up, to engulf. Okay. So he wants the Lord to swallow up, to kind of consume, destroy them, right? Destroy them, and maybe what would be the difference here? What would we talk about? Because destroy would be maybe a more vague word, right? Like a simpler word, destroy. Bala is maybe a little higher in terms of being specific. How are they different? Well, destroy, could mean if you destroyed, you'd leave remnants behind. Like if you destroy a building, you knock it down, there's still bricks and stones there. Whereas David's saying, raise it to the ground so there's not anything left. That kind of destruction, right? Consume it, just till there's nothing left. So Lord, destroy and divide their tongues. Leso nam. Let's take a look at that for a minute here. Yeah, destroy, O Lord, divide their tongues. I want to look at that here. Okay, that's exactly what I thought it was. So this is a curse based on the Tower of Babel, right? These people, what was it? Letonam? I can't remember his name now. Hithpoel. It's such a weird name. Hithpoel and Absalom and these people, they're plotting against David, and David's answer is, make them like Babel, right? Make them unable to plan together anymore deceitfully by confusing their languages, dividing them. Yeah, we kind of look at the Old Testament story of Babel. It was once the languages became confused, it was calamity, it was chaos, right? So that's what David wants to see. He wants to see chaos. He wants to see calamity because their tongues are divided. For I have seen, for ki, right? Ki ra'iti, for I have seen violence and strife, verib, in the city. Hamas, yeah, and strife in the city. So going on to verse 10. So what is, violence? Man, you could describe, of course, they've kind of kicked David out of the city. This whole thing with Absalom in the tent on top of the temple. Do these concubines have any choice whether they want to sleep with Absalom or not? That could be the violence that David's referring to. David could be referring to the violence against his kingship, right? Absalom is making a direct affront to David's rule. There could be other, throwing David out. There could be other, there's probably some like just straight up physical violence and which made David flee the city. There's lots of things, and I would say all of the above, right? I think violence here works for everything, right? There's violence and strife in the city. So David wants the Lord to divide their tongues like Babel in the city of Jerusalem. Let's go on, verse 10. Vayom Valala, excuse me. Yeso Vebuha, al Homoteha, Ve'aven, Ve'amal, excuse me, Bekira. So day ve'omam, yom is day, so ve'yomam, so we have day and night. Lala, actually, what is the root word there for night? It's an interesting one. Lail, right? So day and night, veso vubaha, vibuha, they go around it. Let's look that word up. So it is from the word sabab, to turn about, go around, surround. Let's look for. Yeah, go around is pretty much the consistent translation of this verb. So if it's go around or kind of to encircle or to enclose, the question I had, what exactly are they? Are they? Yeah. So it seems like what. So there was this concept of a watchman who would be on the walls of the city, and the watchman would walk the walls of the city at night. Um, and it was his job to keep an eye on the walls of the city, and if anyone was trying to attack the city, or even if there was enemies far off coming towards the city, it was the watchman's responsibility to keep an eye out. So it sounds like, though, that the people who are here, right? Because we refer back to verse 9. There's strife and there's violence in the city, and it seems like, so the strife and violence in the city, day and night, these people are walking the walls of the city, but instead of looking out, they're looking in at what's happening inside the city, and seemingly maybe they like it, maybe they think it's good, or they're not necessarily standing against it. And iniquity and trouble are in the midst of it. So, like, there's people who serve in the city. There's this Hithpolel, Ahithophel, and Absalom and other advisors. So they're actively doing evil things. Like, so the people in charge, the leadership, they're doing evil stuff. But then the watchmen, who are supposed to be aware of that evil stuff and kind of yell it out to the people, they seem to be, instead of doing their job, they're looking at the evil in the midst of the city and saying nothing either, which is not good, right? Um, oh, I'm totally wrong here. Because, okay, violence and strife are in the city, and I think, yeah, the note here in the study Bible is actually making a point that the psalmist may be personifying violence and strife itself. So violence and strife are the watchmen walking the city walls, looking at the iniquity and trouble that are in the middle of the city. So, like, maybe opportunistically, or the violence and strife are looking on, in kind of in maybe in the way of, like, almost pleasure, like, oh, look what's happening, the city's falling apart. uh you know um so David is definitely, it was his home city, it's where he lived, it's where the royal palace is, where the temple is, and David is very scornfully now referring to Jerusalem and the people that live in it. Verse 11. I mean, I don't know much more we can soak out of that verse, and we kind of got to keep moving forward. So, verse 11. Havaot bekira velo yamis merahoa tok umirma. Yeah. Destruction is in its midst, and not and okay, yeah. So we have the velo, which is a negative particle attached to, which is attached to depart. So do not depart, right? So in its midst, so destruction is in the midst of it, and does not depart from its streets, right? And does well, and then the way the Hebrew is we have a kind of a hendiasis where we have destruction. No, that wouldn't be quite right. Destruction is in the midst. I think we would understand that oppression from the last part of the sentence here for Tok would actually be an oppression does not depart from its streets. Probably depression and oppression and deceit do not depart from its streets. Let's see how the English and the ESV translates it. Ruin is in its midst. Oppression and fraud do not depart from its marketplace. Yeah. Oppression and deceit. I'm guessing that, let's see here. Mirma is from the word Ramah, and to beguile, deal treacherously with. There must be some connotation with money changers, because the Lord has a very strong opinion of money changers. People come into there is no such thing as a Federal Reserve. There's no such thing as a universal. What's the word? No, I'm forgetting it. Universal currency, right? So you're going to come in from the city with goods or something to trade, and then you're going to go to a money changer, either giving up the goods, or perhaps you have like weights of measures of gold or various precious metals, and you'll have them exchanged for either gold or silver in amounts that can be actually spent, or maybe shekels or coinage that can be spent, right? As a person coming from the country, you're at the mercy of the money changers because you don't know how the scales work. You don't know what the rate might even be, right? And so the Lord knows that with certain, that old Spider-Man. Listen, Spider-Man's popular right now. The movies out there. With great power comes great responsibility. So these money changers have great power over people. They have to be honest with them. Like God's given them this very cushy position where they have, they're literally making money off of doing nothing. They're not working very hard when they do money changing. They take some sort of payment for exchanging money, but they don't do any kind of hard physical work, right? So for that great advantage, they're given this great responsibility, and they should not betray that responsibility. But they do, and it makes God very angry when money changers take advantage of the people they're supposed to take care of, right? In general, God doesn't like when he puts people in a position of power and they take advantage of that power. He doesn't really care for it, right? Especially when you think of the greatest example of this is Jesus Christ. My goodness, he has every power, that you could possibly think of. And Christ never uses his powers to take advantage of anyone, ever. This shows God's heart. He doesn't want us doing differently. But of course we do. I'm wondering in the text then if this word specifically is tied to money changing, which is why we get marketplace stuff here in the ESV translation, right? Oppression and fraud in the sense of not getting what your payment's worth, right? Do not part from its marketplace. And of course, we know this is a problem when Jesus comes to the temple place. You've made my Father's house into a den of robbers, right? So, yeah. Iniquity and trouble are within it. Ruin is in its midst. Let's look at that one real quick. Yeah, so it says havoot, which is from chava, calamity, Destruction comes from the word desire. So it seems to be a destruction that is one that is personal. Okay. Okay, let's continue on to verse 12. Ki Kilo oyeb yeharepeni ve'esa lo mesani ale higdeal. Okay. Oh, there's a little more here. Ve'esater mimenu. For it is not an enemy who reproaches me, and I could bear that, nor is it one who hates me that's against me, who has exalted himself, and I could hide from him. See, translation is, for it is not an enemy who taunts me, then I could bear it. That's pretty close to what I translated. It is not an adversary who deals insolent with me, then I could hide from him. But it is you, a man my equal, my companion, my familiar friend. Okay, let's do verse 13 then too, because they connected together, they make more sense. Ve'ata enavos ke'er ki alupi ume udadi. But it was you, a man, my equal, my companion, and my acquaintance. Let's look at these words then. Obviously, they're meaningful. So let's look at first my equal. Yeah, this has kind of got a numerical idea to it. So some of the translations are arrangement, assessment, frame, suite, valuation, value, what belongs. So I'm guessing that like there's some kind of idea of figuring in this word, right? Like and then perhaps it is you figure what's equal for what, right? So he's kind of putting it here like you were my equal. My companion. Let's look up this word. Captain. Oh, my son and I, when we were stuck in quarantine, Moses and I watched The Lord of the Rings. And that section with Boromir is so sad. At the very end, when Boromir is killed, he says, "I would have followed you, my friend, my captain, my king." Yeah, it's good. It's a good line. So yeah, it seems like he's saying captain, chief friend, you know. So like his maybe a modern parlance, his bestie, his best friend, right? My companion, my acquaintance. This is interesting. Let's go to this one. Okay, so this is my yada. So the one I knew, and this is interesting. I acquaintance makes sense. It's someone I know, but of course we know in the Old Testament that to yada someone, often in like the patriarchal time, to know someone is to lie with them, is to be sexually intimate with them. Now I'm not saying that is what's going on here. It's obviously not, but he's saying that's the level of our friendship, right? We're not like barely friends. we know each other. We know each other in a very intimate way. We're best friends. We're people who we know each other's thoughts and fears and desires and loves, and we're deep friends. You know, there's nothing that drives me crazy more than it was a different time. Abraham Lincoln had a close friend, very close friend, and in his diary it was told, you know, that they would often sleep in the same bed, which was common during that time because you know you don't have a heater working at night, right? So it's like 20 below at night. There's no heat. I mean, it's cold, right? It's a fairly normal thing. And of course, because they in that culture they don't have any context of homosexuality. It's a Victorian age still, or that mindset at least in America. There's no thoughts about these kinds of things, so there's no concept. You know, so two men sleeping in the same bed on cold nights who are close friends to conserve heat. There's no thought process here that they're gay, right? But then someone wrote a book, I think it's about 4 or 5 years ago, that like this is secretly Lincoln telling us that he was homosexual. I'm like, no, no. And the same thing's true here. David can describe his friend as being someone he knows, and he means it in an intimate way, but it is not sexual. Like his friendship with Jonathan was a deep, deep. What's the word? Oh, I'm forgetting the word now. Where it's not. Oh. Platonic. Thank you. I don't know why I couldn't remember the name. It's a platonic relationship. There is no sexual feelings in it. That's a really sad part is that the Lord meant for sex to be contained within marriage, right? That was its proper place. That was where it was to be dealt with. We, as a culture, have completely lifted it from sex, you know, freed it, as we would say, right, from marriage, and now it infects everything, right? Sexual connotations are in everything we do, and it's our fault because we took it out of where it was supposed to stay, and then we threw it around everywhere, right? Terrible. um, Reality is that they had this deep Jonathan and David. When you read about their friendship and their platonic, you know, loving relationship they had for one another, I'll tell you, as a man, I wish I had a brother, a friend who, you know, cared about me and I cared about him at that kind of level, who would betray his own father to keep his friend safe, which is what Jonathan did numerous times for David. Right. And David stood up for Jonathan. This guy, you know, I'm sure that everyone was probably telling David, why are you friends with Jonathan? His dad's trying to kill you. Are you nuts? And David's like, that's my best friend. He's just the best friend I've ever had. You know, I mean, like someone who will always defend you, who will always do their best to take care of you and to protect you. You know, they're few and far between. And immediately, you know, like like I said, it's frustrating because you want to have this kind of friendship, you want to talk to another man like this, and then people like will drag in other stupid connotations. It's just like I just want to have a friend, you know, not have these kind of dumb things attached to it. Anyway, this is what it's getting at. This Yadati, right? It is he's an acquaintance he's someone that I know him intimately, and he's betrayed me, right? I can't imagine how much David must have been hurting. So going on then, we're going to try to get through, oh my gosh, 19. We'll have to go a little faster here, huh? Verse 14. Asir Yada Namtik Saud Bebet Elohim Nehalek Berajes. We who together We took sweet counsel to the house of God and walked in the throng. So that would probably in like the assembly of believers, right? In other words, we walked around in the temple. The temple proper was where the business of like the sacrifices to God happened, and then in the Holy of Holies, where the menorah was, where the incense altar was, and the Holiest of Holy, where the Ark of the Covenant was, and of course, certain offerings were sprinkled upon that, for like the Festival of Atonement and other general places. But there were also additional courtyards to the temple area where most of the day-to-day things happened for the people. So David's like, we used to walk in that temple. I wish I could. Maybe I have one here. Hold on a second. I want to show you what I'm trying to get at here. I think when you get into the Gospel, I think I have a picture somewhere of the temple in. Yeah, there's a table of contents for the illustrations, I think. Excuse me. Articles and charge list. Yeah, that's what I need. There we are. 1710. Now, this wouldn't have been the same in David's time. This is Herod's temple, but it would give us a sense of this. Okay. Oh, shoot. That's not what I'm looking for. Okay. Let's see if we can get there. From a description of the. We could probably make that work. Let's see if I can find something better, though. 1838. Yeah, that's a little better. We'll go with that. Okay. So we have this description of the temple. You see that in here? There's a little courtyard here. And then there would have been the Gentile. I believe this is the women's court. Yeah. And then there would have been a Gentiles court. You see where they're letting out here to the side? There would have been a huge courtyard area over here as well. So, and of course, this is Herod's temple. It would have been a little different than the temple during David's time. But probably in the idea of here, walked in the throng, walked amongst the people, probably in the temple place, the temple area. David and Absalom and Ahithophel were all people who, again, they were friends, they were acquaintances, they were best friends, and then they walked in the temple together and talked. So they shared not only their friendship on a human level and a father-son level, a friend level, but they also shared their friendship in terms of they believed the same things. They shared the same religion, the same theology, the same way of viewing life. They were very close in this manner. I've talked to some pastor friends who have had members come to them and say, we don't want to be part of the church anymore. You offended us, or the case be. And those pastors have just felt so hurt about it hurt them so much that it's hard enough to lose a friend, but then you lose someone who also you thought you shared the same ideas on life and on God and theology and everything else. That all goes away. David is just he's wrecked. Verse 15. Yasi Mavet, Alamo Yeredu Saol Hayim Ki Raot Bimguram Bekerima Bekerbam. Sorry, Bekirbam, probably. Okay. Let let's seize them death. So let death seize them. Let them go down into Sheol, into hell. This is quite the curse, isn't it? Right? Let death seize them. Let them go down into hell. For I'm trying to make sense of if the alive is attached to hell or if alive is attached to the next part of the sentence. Let's look at our ESV translation to get a sense of it. We're on verse 15. Let death steal over them. Let them go down. Okay. Sheol alive. Okay. Now, just to refresh your memory, Hebrews don't have an active sense of persecution or no persecution of punishment, of active punishment of what's the word? Torture. That's the word I'm looking for. In hell, whereas Jesus Christ describes hell as a place where the fire does not go out, the pains go on forever, the torture is not just the anguish and gnashing of teeth goes on forever, right? Well, David is saying Sheol in a Hebrew sense would actually be a place that is cold, a place that is lifeless, a place, Sheol, it would be hell for an Israelite, because for an Israelite, it's always about getting closer to God, right? Being in the promised land, being able to go to the temple, right? The worst place you can possibly be is as far away from God as you can get. And that's where Sheol is. And most people go down to Sheol when they're dead. But David wants this person to go down to Sheol while they're still alive, to be in this place of lack of activity, of coldness, a place away from God and his light and his life. He wants them to live in that place. It's a curse for sure. For wickedness is in their dwellings and amongst them. For evil is in their dwelling place and in their heart. So the ESV translation must be getting from among them to be, yeah, okay. So the translation here of Karev, or Karev, however you want to translate it, would be inward part in the middle. Yeah. So evil is not just in their locality; it literally is in their hearts. So, verse 17. Oh, verse 16. Excuse me, I skipped one. I will. So Ani El Elohim. And this is Kara, a version of Kara, Ekra, whatever. Yahweh Yavosieni. Um, I, Kara, will call up Elohim, so upon God. I will call upon God. Yahweh will save me, right? Um, so his friends he's not going to bother calling on his friends. He's not going to bother calling on the people of Israel to save him. He's going to call upon God because his friends, the people of Israel, have betrayed him, right? These people have taken over the holy city. They've kicked me out. Then, of course, the holy city has become a place where wickedness and evil dwells. I'm not going to call upon them. I'm going to call upon the Lord. Verse 17. Uh, Arev Boker Vesa Horaim Siha Vehema Vehemehe Vayisma Koli. Kooli probably is more appropriate. So Arev is the word for evening. And then Boker, of course, the word for morning. It was so strange to hear it. I knew a little bit of Hebrew when I went to Israel, and you'd hear Hebrews regularly saying, Boker Tov, good morning. Boker being morning, Tov being good, right? Boker Tov. So they flip it, good morning, though they say Boker Tov. Um, Evening, morning, Vesa Yimim, and noon, I will pray. Just to step aside from the context of the psalm, not a bad direction. You may be asking yourself, like, how many times should I pray every day, or something? Well, David thinks it's when you wake, when you go to bed, and at noontime, probably when you're having your noontime meal, maybe, or just at noontime, the middle of the day. So he's praying 3 times a day. I will pray. Now, that doesn't have to be exhaustive. He could be praying at other times as well, but it seems like if you pray in the morning, in the noon, and in the evening, maybe it's a Hebrew way of just saying, I'm going to pray the whole day, right? Which Hebrews do a lot. Our creed does this. Martin Luther does this in the explanation of the creed, like my eyes, ears, all my senses, my reason, and still take. He does this huge long list. I mean, he could have just said, the Father has created everything. He's given me everything. But the word everything is nebulous and it's boring. So Luther makes it clear what he means, but he has to say a lot of different stuff to try to really get at how much God actually does. David uses 3 words to probably say, I'm going to pray all day. But each one of those things has a different connotation, doesn't it? When you rise in the morning, it's a different kind of prayer than when you lay yourself down to bed at night. And of course, both of those are different from when you pray at noontime, because you've had half the day, you're going to have another half of the day. And of course, it just shapes how you pray and what you're thinking about. And all 3 of these things are different kinds of prayers. It's a richer way to describe it. It's a richer way to say it as opposed to just saying all day, right? And cry aloud. I will pray and I will cry aloud, and he will hear my voice. The Lord will hear me. I mean, there's something very reassuring about that, because that's the biggest thing about prayer. You're wondering if you're actually being heard. Of course, God doesn't always answer how we wish he would, but David is sure, regardless of how God answers, that he will listen. Verse 18. Pada besa lo napsi mikarab li ki berabim hayu imadi. Okay. He has redeemed in peace my soul from the battle, for against me many there were, for there were many against me. What does the translation say? He redeems my soul in safety from the battle that I wage, for many are arrayed against me. Yeah, and I think that's accurate. I mean, we can at least say half of Israel, if not more, are with Absalom against David. Sorry, my throat is still kind of coming back from the cold, so I'm trying to keep it lubricated with water here. Sorry for the drinking there in the middle. Verse 19, as we close. Yishma el veya anem veyoseb kedem salah aser en halipot lamo velo yareu Elohim. So El is like an abbreviation of Elohim, means God. This is how we get Hallelujah. Oh, no, that would Yah would be a abbreviation of Yahweh. El would be an abbreviation of Elohim, which is the more generalized word for God. Less so than Yahweh, right? So El, God, Yasa, or Shema, God will hear what? Hear my cries. We talked about from verse 18. God will hear my cries and afflict them. And even he who abides from old. Salah is right in the middle of this verse. That's really interesting. Oh. So the Salah are we're not sure they were in the original text. They might have been editorial marks by the Masoretes. Masoretes were a group of Jewish people who were living around 300 AD. This is long after the text is written. So were the Masoretes also turned the Hebrew text from a scroll kind of thing into a codex, a book? So did the Masoretes put in these, the Masoretes also added all the vowel pointing, the separated words. They did a lot of editorial stuff to help us understand the text better. Were the Salahs interpolations, or were they originally part of the text? As far as we can understand, Salah is like some kind of interjection, meaning, maybe meaning that this is where a refrain might happen, or this is an ending of a section. But it's strange that it puts it right in the middle of 19. Because you think it would come after verse 19, at the very end of it. So God will hear and afflict them. He who is enthroned from of old, because they do not change and do not fear God. Trying to figure out how this sentence works here. Is the he who is enthroned from of old referring to God himself? So God, he who is enthroned from of old, will give ear and humble them? Or is it God will give ear and humble them, even he who is? So in other words, like even the old wise man, he'll humble even that guy, right? Or is it the other way around? Because they do not change and do not fear God. Let's take a look at the note in the ESV here. Study Bible from CPH. Psalmist's enemies refuse to change their attitude toward him or repent of their sin before God. As a result, God will respond to them with discipline and judgment. You don't really have that doesn't help a lot in terms of this. Well, I mean, the number and case does match God, the old man, right? Even he who abides from of old. It's funny too that they capitalize that too. Today I'm gonna lean towards one direction just so we can make sense of it. I'm thinking that God is going to afflict, young and old. Even though, so we might look at someone who's like, even this old guy who's kind of done things right. No, God's even going to afflict him because he's not willing to change from his evil ways and fear God. Right? So it doesn't matter if they're old, if they have respect or wisdom, it doesn't matter. If they don't fear God and listen to him, God's going to afflict them. Okay? And that's where we're at. We're going to stop there and pick up the last section, 20 through 23, next time, and we'll have finished Psalm 55. It's been a pleasure to be with you. Hope you learned something today. There was one thing I was going to add in here. That was interesting. That doesn't matter. We'll stop there. The Lord bless your day. I hope you have a lovely day, and thanks for being with us in the study of God's Word. Blessings.